Jacob trudged through the dense underbrush of Nereth's twilight forests, his footsteps muffled by the thick moss that carpeted the ground. The dual suns hovered just at the horizon, casting long shadows but never fully disappearing. It was during one of his long surveys for habitable zones that he first noticed the faint glow emanating from a cluster of bushes. As he pushed aside the foliage, his eyes met a scene from a dream. Bioluminescent plants illuminated a small village with structures woven from the radiant fibers of glowing flora. The inhabitants were equally luminous, their skin shimmering with a soft light. Jacob froze, captivated by the sight, but it was the approach of one of the villagers that held him in place. "Who ventures so boldly into our hidden enclave?" The voice was melodic, the speaker a tall, slender figure whose brightness seemed to intensify with each step closer. Jacob, maintaining his composure, replied, "My name is Jacob. I'm an explorer, studying the unique ecosystems of Nereth. I didn't mean to intrude." The luminous figure paused, tilting his head, his light dimming slightly as if in thought. "I am Kalen, leader of the Elari. Your presence is unusual, but your purpose sounds pure. Come, share your stories so we might find the intent of your heart." Grateful for the peaceful reception, Jacob followed Kalen into the village. They passed through archways of woven light and under hanging gardens that sparkled like stars. Other Elari watched curiously, but kept their distance. Sitting on a bench that seemed to pulse with a gentle light, Kalen gestured for Jacob to speak. "Tell us, Jacob of Earth, what brings you to the shadowed lands of our world?" Jacob unpacked his gear, showing Kalen maps and instruments. "I study planets and their life forms to learn how they adapt to their environments. Nereth is unique due to its perpetual twilight. I didn't expect to find intelligent life, though." Kalen nodded. "We, the Ailari, have thrived in the twilight for millennia, drawing energy from the luminescent flora and fauna. The darkness beyond our borders is filled with unknowns that we do not brave, but your journey here speaks of courage." Jacob sensed an opportunity. "Perhaps we can learn from each other. I can share my knowledge of the cosmos and other worlds, and in return, learn how your people have harnessed the light." A younger Ailari, drawn by the discussion, stepped forward. Her glow was softer, her curiosity palpable. "I am Lyra," she introduced herself. "Your talk of other worlds fascinates me. We are taught to fear the dark, but you've traveled through it to reach us." Their conversation stretched into hours, with Kalen and Lyra asking questions about the stars, the planets, and the vastness of space. Jacob, in turn, was eager to learn about the Elari's culture and their bioluminescent technology. As the meeting drew to a close, Kalen extended an invitation. "Jacob, your insights are valuable, and your respect for our ways is clear. Stay with us, share your knowledge, and let us show you the wonders of Nereth beyond the twilight." Grateful and eager, Jacob agreed, his mission now intertwined with the fate of a new world and its luminescent people. The partnership was set under Nereth's dim skies, promising a blend of exploration and understanding that would enrich both the human and the Ailari in ways they couldn't yet foresee. Chapter 2. The Ailari's Dilemma. Jacob spent the first few weeks on Nereth engrossed in the Ailari's way of life, learning how they harnessed the bioluminescent flora for both energy and sustenance. Lyra became his guide, introducing him to various aspects of their culture and the technologies they employed. Each day brought new discoveries, but also new questions about the Ailari's fears of the darkness that surrounded their glowing enclave. 1. Evening, as they sat under a canopy of luminescent leaves, Jacob broached a sensitive subject. "Lyra, you've shown me so much about your world, but I'm curious, why do your people fear the dark so deeply? What lies beyond the lighted areas?" Lyra's glow dimmed slightly, her usual bright curiosity clouded by concern. Our legends speak of creatures that thrive in the darkness, creatures that our light cannot reach nor repel. These tales have been passed down for generations. We stay within the light for safety. Jacob nodded, understanding the power of ingrained beliefs. In my travels, I've found that sometimes fear comes from the unknown. Maybe I could help explore these dark areas to learn if the danger is real or just a tale. Kaelin joined them, overhearing their conversation. Jacob, your offer is generous, but our fears are not unfounded. However, perhaps it's time we reassess these old legends with new eyes. Intrigued by the potential of this venture, another Ilari, Torin, a young and adventurous type, stepped forward. I would like to join if you go. We have technologies that might protect us, tools that haven't been tested in the dark. I believe this is worth exploring. With a team formed, they planned their expedition. Over the next few days, they prepared by gathering light pods, protective gear, and recording devices. Jacob shared techniques from his caving days on Earth, teaching them how to navigate and map unknown terrains safely. The night before the expedition, the group gathered for a final briefing. Remember, Jacob instructed, stay within sight of each other. Our lights must always overlap to ensure no one is left in the dark. Torin, eager yet anxious, checked his light harness. What if we encounter something? Do we retreat immediately? Jacob adjusted his own gear, reassuring him. We'll assess the situation calmly. The goal is to gather information, not confront mysteries head-on. Safety is our priority. As dawn approached, never breaking into full daylight, the team stood at the edge of the lighted boundary. Lyra, her glow steady and bright, looked at Jacob. Thank you for doing this, for helping us face our ancient fears. Jacob smiled, his headlamp cutting through the twilight. We're doing this together. Whatever we find, we learn and grow from it. With that, the group stepped forward, their lights merging into a single luminous path as they delved into the unlit forests of Nereth. Behind them, the village watched, their glow a silent cheer for the brave few stepping into the dark. Chapter 3. Nightfall's Whisper. As the group ventured deeper into the dark, the silence of the unexplored forest enveloped them. The usual chatter of Nereth's luminescent wildlife faded away, replaced by the soft crunch of their boots on the underbrush. Jacob led the way, his headlamp casting long shadows between the trees. Torin kept close behind Jacob, his own light flickering nervously. It's quieter here than I expected. Shouldn't there be something living in this darkness? Jacob glanced back, reassuring him with a smile. Darkness often seems lifeless because we're not used to seeing what hides in it, but it's full of life, just not the kind we're familiar with. Lyra, walking beside Torin, added, Our stories? Tell of the shadow beasts that roam these parts. What if they are real, Jacob? Before Jacob could answer, Kaelin, who had been quietly observing their surroundings, pointed ahead. Look there, on that tree. Those markings, do you see? They're not natural. Something has been here, something intelligent enough to leave a pattern. The group gathered around the tree, examining the strange symbols scratched into the bark. Could this be a warning, or a message? Lyra wondered aloud. Jacob took several photos with his camera. We'll analyze these later. For now, let's keep moving. Keep your lights up and stay alert. They continued on, the tension among them palpable as they penetrated further into the darkness. After a few hours of cautious trekking, they reached a clearing. The ground was soft, and the air felt different, thicker, almost. Suddenly Torin stopped, his light fixating on something in the dirt. Footprints, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Something big passed through here recently. The group circled the tracks, each member processing the discovery in silence. The prints were unlike anything terrestrial. They had too many toes, and the gait was uneven, as if the creature walked with a limp. This changes everything, Kaelin mused, his tone serious. We're not alone here. And whatever made these isn't just wandering, it's capable of reason. Jacob, knelt by the tracks, measuring them against his hand. "We need to be careful. We have proof now that legends might have some basis in reality. But remember, our goal is to understand, not confront." As they set up a temporary camp to discuss their next move, the reality of their discovery began to sink in. They were in uncharted territory, both physically and metaphorically. "Should we continue following the tracks?" Torin asked, his curiosity battling his caution. Lyra looked at Jacob, seeking guidance. "What do you think, Jacob? Is it worth the risk?" Jacob considered their options. "If we follow at a safe distance, keep to the light, and prepare to retreat at any sign of danger, we might learn more about these creatures peacefully." The group agreed, and after a short rest, they followed the trail left by the mysterious entity. Each step took them further into the unknown, but together they moved forward, their lights intertwined, a small but brave illumination in the vast darkness of Nerith. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Dark. The tracks led deeper into the forest, weaving through dense tangles of bioluminescent undergrowth that glowed faintly beneath their lamps. Jacob and the group moved cautiously, their voices low, as they exchanged observations. "These markings on the trees," Torin said, pointing to another scratched pattern on the bark. "Do you think it's a trail marker? Could they be leaving these to guide others?" Jacob stopped to examine the etching. "It's possible. These look deliberate, almost as if they're pointing in a certain direction. Whatever made them has a sense of purpose." Kaelin knelt beside Jacob, his light casting long shadows over the markings. "We should be prepared for anything. If these creatures have intelligence, they might not take kindly to intruders." Lyra stood a few feet away, her glow dimmer than usual. "But what if they're not hostile? If we retreat now, we'll never know. Maybe they're as curious about us as we are about them." Jacob nodded. "That's the idea. We keep going, but we stay cautious. No sudden movements, no provoking them. We're here to learn." Torin adjusted his equipment, his movements quick and nervous. "What's the plan if we actually meet one of these, whatever they are? Talk to it? If it's willing?" "To communicate, yes," Jacob replied. "If not, we step back and observe. No need to escalate anything." As they moved on, the faint sounds of rustling began to reach their ears. At first, it was so soft that Jacob wondered if it was just the wind stirring the leaves. But the noises grew steadily louder, a faint clicking, a strange rhythm, as though something were communicating in a language of sound rather than words. Kaelin motioned for the group to stop. "Do you hear that?" Lyra stepped closer to Jacob. "It's coming from up ahead. Could it be them?" Jacob held up a hand, signaling silence. He crouched low, scanning the shadows beyond their light's reach. "Keep your light steady," he whispered. "Don't make sudden moves. Let's see if it comes to us." The clicking grew nearer, accompanied by faint shuffling. A shape began to emerge in the darkness just beyond the reach of their lamps. It wasn't quite like the stories, no monstrous claws or glowing red eyes. Instead, it appeared lithe and graceful, moving with a careful curiosity rather than aggression. Torin tensed, gripping his light harness tightly. "Jacob, what do we do?" "Nothing yet," Jacob said quietly. "Hold still. Let it approach." The figure stopped just at the edge of the group's combined light, its form still mostly obscured. Then, as if responding to their patience, it stepped fully into view. The creature stood about Jacob's height, its skin a deep dark hue that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. It had elongated limbs, a head with soft ridges that might have been sensory organs, and eyes that shimmered faintly like distant stars. Kaelin exhaled slowly, his voice calm. "Incredible. It's not what I expected." Lyra took a cautious step forward, her own light shifting slightly. "Hello," she said softly, her tone gentle. "We mean no harm. We just want to understand." The creature tilted its head, the clicking sound changing in pitch. It took another step closer, its movements deliberate, then it paused, as if waiting for the response. Jacob raised his hand slowly, palms out. We're here to learn, to observe. If you can understand us, we want to share knowledge. For a long moment, the creature simply stood there, the clicking slowing to a steady rhythm. Then, as if testing their intent, it extended a long, slender limb toward Jacob. He didn't flinch, instead holding his ground as the creature gently touched his hand. The sensation was strange. Its skin was cool and smooth, yet firm. The contact lasted only a moment before the creature withdrew. It made one final clicking sound, then turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the group stunned but unharmed. "What just happened?" Torin asked, his voice shaky. "It might have been a gesture of trust," Kalen said, his tone thoughtful. "Or perhaps a warning. Either way, it didn't attack." Lyra's glow brightened slightly. "Jacob, what do you think? Was that an invitation or a goodbye?" Jacob lowered his hand slowly, his mind racing. "I think it's the start of something. Whatever these beings are, they didn't see us as enemies. That means we can keep learning." The group exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They were standing on the edge of a new understanding, with many more questions than answers. But for now, they had encountered the unknown, and the unknown had chosen not to strike. Chapter 5. The uprising of light. When the group returned to the Ailari village, their account of the encounter spread quickly. Some villagers listened with cautious curiosity, while others reacted with fear. The elders, the council of luminous beings who maintained the traditions and laws, were divided in their response. They summoned the group for a formal discussion in the central plaza, an area illuminated by cascading vines of bioluminescent flowers. Jacob and the others stood in a line before the council. The eldest of the elders, Solon, stepped forward, his light the brightest of them all. His voice resonated like a calm river. "You ventured into the dark lands, a place forbidden by the laws of the Ailari. Explain your actions, human Jacob." Jacob looked to Lyra and Kalen before speaking. "We sought knowledge, not defiance. The stories of darkness have been handed down through generations, but they are untested. I believed it was worth discovering if the danger was real." Solon's light dimmed slightly, a sign of his displeasure. "And what did you find?" Lyra, her own glow steady, stepped forward. "We found a being, intelligent, deliberate, but not aggressive. It could have harmed us, but chose not to. Instead, it made contact with Jacob. It was an encounter that challenged our understanding." A murmur spread through the gathered Ailari. Some whispered about the courage of the group. Others voiced fears of what their actions might bring. Another elder, Neral, spoke. "You risked all our lives by inviting the unknown into our midst. If these creatures decide to follow you here, what then?" Kalen, standing tall beside Jacob, addressed Neral directly. "Elder, we cannot progress as a people if we cling to fear. This was not an invitation to conflict, but an opportunity to understand. Ignoring the dark does not make it disappear. It only ensures we remain blind to what lies beyond." Jacob added, "On Earth, we learned that confronting the unknown with respect and preparation can lead to discoveries that benefit everyone. What we encountered wasn't an enemy. It may be a neighbor, one we haven't spoken to yet." The murmurs grew louder, and the elders exchanged uncertain glances. Solon raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "This matter is not so simple. The laws have protected us for centuries. To change them is no small thing." Lyra stepped closer to Solon. "Elder Solon, I understand the weight of our traditions, but perhaps it is time to revisit them. Jacob has shown us a new perspective. If we turn away from this chance to learn, we may miss the opportunity to grow stronger together." Another elder, Yaren, who had been silent until now, nodded thoughtfully. "Change is never easy, but Lyra speaks the truth. If we remain isolated by our own fears, we risk stagnation. Let us consider a trial period, a controlled exploration of the dark lands under strict guidance." Jacob and the group have shown their willingness to take these steps cautiously. Solon hesitated, then sighed. Very well, we will not make a decision in haste. The council will deliberate, and in the meantime, no further explorations are permitted without our approval. As the crowd began to disperse, Jacob felt the tension lift slightly. The confrontation was not fully resolved, but a crack had formed in the centuries-old wall of fear. Lyra turned to him, her glow a bit brighter now. Thank you for standing with us, Jacob. I didn't know how this would go, but we've made them. Think, at least. Kaelin clasped Jacob's shoulder. We've taken the first step. Now we just have to keep showing them that the dark isn't our enemy. Jacob smiled faintly, looking out over the village as the lights dimmed in preparation for the rest cycle. It's a start. Change never happens all at once. But if we keep moving forward together, we can make it happen. Chapter 6. The Trial of Shadows. The village was abuzz with anticipation as the trial began. Jacob and the team stood before the elders. In the luminous council chamber, a circular room where the walls glowed with shifting patterns of light. The gathered crowd whispered anxiously, their faces a mixture of curiosity and fear. Solon raised his hands and the room grew quiet. Jacob of Earth, he began, your actions have challenged the traditions that define us. You entered the forbidden darkness and returned with claims that defy our oldest beliefs. Tell us why we should consider what you have seen. Jacob took a deep breath. He knew this was a pivotal moment, not just for the Ilari, but for the fragile trust he and his team had built. I came to Nerith as an explorer, seeking to understand your world. When I learned of the fear your people hold for the dark, I saw an opportunity to learn more, not to break your laws, but to find answers. The creature we encountered was not hostile. It was curious, just as we were. Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was steady, her glow a little brighter than usual. Elders, I was there. I saw what Jacob saw. The creature could have harmed us, but didn't. It extended a hand, something that speaks of understanding, not aggression. Perhaps we have misjudged the darkness all this time. Norel, one of the stricter elders, leaned forward. And what if you're wrong? What if your actions bring danger to our people? We have survived by avoiding the unknown, by staying within the safety of our light. Kaelin, his stance firm, spoke up. Elder Nerel, we cannot grow if we never take risks. Every advancement we've made has come from stepping into the unknown. Jacob has shown us that the darkness is not a death sentence, it's a frontier. I believe the legends have grown, larger than the truth. Perhaps it is time to revisit those old stories with new eyes. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others shook their heads. Solon raised a hand to restore order. What you propose is not a small change. To question the old stories, to re-examine what we hold as truth. These are not actions we take lightly. Lyra took another step forward. Elder Solon, what Jacob and the others have done isn't a dismissal of our traditions. It's an expansion of our understanding. We can honor our past while still moving forward. This isn't about discarding our identity. It's about enriching it, Jacob added. On Earth, we've faced countless unknowns. The fear is always there. But when we've chosen to confront it with care and respect, we found solutions that benefit everyone. The Ilari have such potential. I see it in how you harness light, how you care for one another. Facing the darkness doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means growing stronger together. The council chamber grew quiet again as the elders conferred among themselves. The tension was palpable. Then Yeren, who had been one of the more open-minded elders, turned to address the room. If we do not face the dark, we may never truly know what lies beyond it. If the creatures Jacob describes are intelligent, then perhaps they are waiting for us to take the first step. Solon's glow flickered as he nodded slowly. Very well. This council will not make a final decision tonight. We will continue to deliberate. In the meantime, Jacob and his team will provide a full report of what they encountered. and we will consider a controlled expedition under strict supervision." A ripple of relief passed through Jacob's group. The trial wasn't over, but the door was no longer shut. Lyra turned to Jacob with a small, grateful smile. "You did it. They're listening." Jacob nodded, his expression calm but determined. "It's not finished yet, but we've come this far. That's what matters." Kaelin placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "We stand with you. Together, we'll show them that the darkness doesn't have to define us." As the council adjourned, Jacob and his team left the chamber, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about proving a point, it was about shaping a future where the Elari could embrace both the light and the shadow, discovering what they might become if they stepped beyond their own fears. Chapter 7. Illumination. The decision came days later. The council had agreed to a single supervised journey into the dark. Jacob and his team would lead the way, accompanied by a group of cautious Ilari volunteers. The village was alive with both excitement and unease as the expedition prepared to set out. Standing at the edge of the lighted forest, Jacob adjusted his equipment. Lyra was next to him, her bioluminescence steady, though she frequently glanced back at the gathered onlookers. "I didn't think they'd agree," she said quietly. "Sometimes all it takes is a first step," Jacob replied, tightening the straps on his pack. "Once people see it's possible, they start to believe it." Torin walked over, his own glow shifting slightly as he moved. "Ready to lead us into the unknown, Jacob? Because I think I just heard a rumor about shadow monsters big enough to eat us whole." Lyra rolled her eyes. "Torin, I think you'd be more useful if you stopped trying to scare everyone." Torin grinned, just keeping it lively. Kaelin joined them, his expression more serious. "We don't know what we'll find out there, but we've taken every precaution. And remember, we're not here to provoke, just to observe and understand." Jacob nodded. "Exactly. We'll keep the group together, stay within sight of each other, and keep our lights overlapping. If anything looks dangerous, we retreat immediately." As they began their journey, the dense bioluminescent forest gradually gave way to taller, darker trees. The glow of the village faded behind them, replaced by the shifting, dim greens and blues of the deeper woods. Jacob could feel the tension in the group as the familiar light grew scarce. Kaelin moved up beside him. "You've done this before, haven't you? Exploring the unknown?" "A few times," Jacob said, stepping over a fallen branch. "But every new place brings its own challenges. And every new place brings its own rewards," Kaelin added, scanning the shadows ahead. They continued in silence for a time, focusing on the terrain. Eventually, Lyra broke the quiet. "What's the darkest place you've ever been, Jacob?" He thought for a moment. "A cave system on Earth. No light at all, not even from plants. Or animals. You lose all sense of time, direction. It's like floating in nothingness." "That sounds terrifying," Torin said, though he sounded more impressed than scared. "And you made it out?" Jacob smiled faintly. "The trick is to take it one step at a time. Don't rush, don't panic. Trust your team and your tools." Kaelin, who had been listening, nodded. "Good advice. We'll keep that in mind." Hours passed as they moved deeper into the forest. The markings on the trees returned, faint scratches, patterns that seemed to lead somewhere. Lyra studied one closely. "They're more frequent now. Whoever made these wants others to follow. Or they're warning us off," Kaelin said, his voice low. Jacob ran his fingers over the latest marking. "If it's a warning, it's not working. We've seen no aggression, no traps, just these symbols. I think they're a path." Torin let out a long breath. "A path to what, though?" "That's what we're here to find out," Jacob replied. They reached a clearing where the ground sloped downward into a series of ridges. The air was cooler here, heavier. Jacob held up a hand, stopping the group. "This looks like a good place to set up a temporary camp. Let's regroup and plan our next move." The team began unpacking supplies, setting up lights and instruments to record their findings. Kaelin worked closely with Jacob, mapping the area, while Lyra and Torin gathered samples from the nearby foliage. As they worked, a faint clicking sound reached their ears. "Did you hear that?" Lyra asked, turning her head. Jacob nodded. "It's faint, but yes." Kaelin looked toward the sound. "The same clicks we heard before?" "Maybe," Jacob said. "It's coming from over that ridge. Let's keep working, but stay alert." The clicking grew louder, and the team instinctively moved closer together. Torin's light wavered for a moment before stabilizing. "This is the part where something jumps out and eats us, right?" "Keep it together," Kaelin said firmly. "We're here to learn." The sound didn't move closer. Instead, it circled the clearing, staying just beyond their line of sight. Jacob remained calm, but he kept one hand near his pack, ready to signal the team to retreat if necessary. Eventually, the clicking faded, leaving the group on edge but unharmed. "It could be a form of communication," Jacob said. "They might be testing us, seeing what we'll do." Lyra stepped closer to him. "And what do we do?" "Nothing," Jacob said. "We keep working, keep watching. Let them see we're not a threat." Kaelin nodded. "A slow approach. Caution. That might be our best move." The group settled in for the night, their lights casting a protective glow. Though the clicking never returned, they all felt its absence as keenly as they had felt its presence. It was a reminder that, while they were not alone, they still had much to learn, and many steps yet to take. Chapter 8. Unity in Twilight. The following morning, the air was thick with anticipation. Jacob and the team continued their journey beyond the clearing, following the faint path of scratches and markings. The clicking sounds they'd heard the previous night didn't return, but the memory lingered in their minds. A gentle reminder that they weren't entirely alone in this dark expanse. As they climbed a low ridge, Lyra stopped to inspect a peculiar pattern etched into the bark of a massive tree. "These are different," she said, tracing the lines with her fingertips. "More complex than the others, almost like writing." Kaelin crouched beside her, his expression thoughtful. "If this is a language, it's one we don't know, but it feels deliberate." Torin glanced back at Jacob. "What do you think?" "Another breadcrumb?" Jacob studied the etchings, then the path ahead. "Could be. Either they're marking a trail or leaving a message. Either way, it means we're getting closer to something." The group pressed on, their lights casting long shadows across the terrain. The trees grew sparser as the path led them into a wide open basin. Here the air was still and cool, and the faint hum of bioluminescent insects gave the area an eerie vibrancy. "Wait," Jacob said suddenly, raising a hand. His headlamp illuminated a structure ahead, partially obscured by the thick mist that clung to the basin floor. The outline was jagged, almost organic in appearance, and its surface glinted faintly. Under their lights, Lyra stepped closer to Jacob, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is that?" Kaelin adjusted his equipment. "It's not natural. Someone, or something, built this." Torin let out a low whistle. "Looks like we found the end of the trail." They approached cautiously, the ground beneath their feet, soft but stable. The structure loomed taller with each step until they stood at its base. It was a massive, curved formation, its surface covered in intricate carvings and glowing faintly in a soft blue hue. Jacob reached out to touch the surface, his fingers brushing against the cool, smooth material. This is incredible. It's like a temple." Lyra pointed to a series of carved panels along the base. "These symbols match the markings we've seen on the trees. It's a message, or maybe a story." Kaelin pulled out a scanner, attempting to record the patterns. "If we can decipher these, we might understand who left them, and why." Torin shifted nervously. "And what if whoever built this shows up?" Jacob gave him a reassuring look. "Then we show them we mean no harm, just like before. We observe, we learn, and we respond with respect." The team spread out slightly, examining the carvings and collecting data. Lyra knelt by a particularly intricate section of the panel, her glow brightening as she traced a series of interlocking shapes. "It almost looks like a map," she said. This could be a guide to more sites like this. Kalen stepped beside her, peering at the shapes. A network of structures? Or maybe just a way to connect their people. Either way, it's more than we've ever known about them. Jacob, still studying the carvings, noticed a faint outline of what looked like a handprint. He pressed his own hand against it, the material beneath his fingers cool and unyielding. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the faint glow of the structure intensified slightly, and the clicking sound returned, soft and steady, coming from all around them. "They're here," Torrance said, his voice tight. The group huddled together, their lights overlapping. Jacob kept his movements slow and deliberate. "Hold steady. Let's see what they do." From the shadows at the edge of the basin, several figures emerged. They were similar to the creature the team had encountered before, tall, dark-skinned beings with shimmering eyes and elongated limbs. Their movements were deliberate, cautious. They formed a loose circle around the group, clicking rhythmically. Lyra held up her hand in greeting, her glow soft and steady. "We mean no harm," she said, her voice calm. "We only want to understand." One of the beings stepped closer, its clicking changing in pitch. It reached out a slender arm, its hand hovering just inches from Lyra's. She stayed perfectly still, letting it close the distance. When it made contact, its touch was gentle, exploratory. After a moment it withdrew and let out a long, steady series of clicks. Jacob stepped forward, mirroring the gesture. Another being approached him, repeating the same motion. When its hand met his, he felt that same cool, smooth texture. The contact lasted a moment before the figure stepped back. "They're not afraid," Kalen said softly. "They're curious, just like us." The figures began moving around the structure, their clicking now sounding more like a conversation. Lyra glanced at Jacob. "What do we do?" Jacob smiled faintly. "We listen, we learn, and we show them. We're willing to share this world with them." The group stood quietly as the beings continued their rhythmic exchanges. It was the start of something new, a fragile connection between two worlds that had once feared each other. For the first time, the dark of Nerith felt less like an unknown void and more like a shared space, filled with possibilities waiting to be discovered.